I want to ask you a very simple question. Have you ever slept a full 8 hours, even rested all weekend, yet still felt exhausted on Monday morning? Not physically tired, but a deeper kind of fatigue, tired of having to start a new day that you are not truly looking forward to. And if you have ever experienced that feeling, let me say one thing to you directly. The problem is not your body. The problem is your vision. Like a car with a full tank of gas but no idea where it is going, it still stays in place. Human beings are the same. When you do not have a clear picture of the future you want to move toward, each passing day becomes just a repeated cycle of obligations, pressure, and endurance. I have met many people who told me that they lack discipline. But deep down, the problem is not that they are not strong enough. It is that they do not know what they are being strong for. When discipline is not connected to a vision big enough, it becomes torture. But when you know exactly why you must get up in the morning, discipline begins to have meaning. And when discipline has meaning, energy is naturally created. I learned this very early in my life. That success does not come from blindly trying harder. It comes from clearly seeing the person you are becoming and living in alignment with that image every single day. In today's video, I will share with you 9 core principles that help you generate energy from vision and transform discipline from forced effort into unshakable belief in your own future. And you should stay until the end of the video, because principle number 7 is something I wish I had understood 10 years earlier, and it could completely change the way you step into each new day. Principle 1. People without vision are always tired. There is a truth that very few people want to admit. Most exhaustion in life does not come from labor, it comes from uncertainty. I have met people who work 12 hours a day and still feel full of energy. And I have also met people who work 8 hours, even less yet, are constantly drained, sluggish, and discouraged. The difference is not in the number of hours they work. It lies in whether or not they know where they are going. Imagine being assigned the task of walking all day, but never being told the destination. No map, no instructions, just keep walking. You would not be tired because of the distance. You would be tired because there is no reason to continue. Life works the same way. When a person wakes up every morning without a clear image of the future they are moving toward, their energy leaks away little by little. They still go to work. They still fulfill their responsibilities. But deep inside, they are merely surviving, not living with direction. I once told my students this. You don't lack energy. You lack a future that is compelling enough. Without vision, each day becomes a burden. Without a destination, every effort feels heavy. And when you do not know why you are trying, even a small obstacle is enough to make you want to stop. I remember a young man who came to me and said he always felt tired. He slept enough. He ate well, but every morning he woke up feeling as though he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I did not ask him about his diet or his daily routine. I asked him only one question. What makes you jump out of bed tomorrow morning? He stayed silent for a long time. Then he lowered his head because he had no answer. And at that moment, I understood the problem. It was not that he lacked health. He lacked a reason. When people cannot see their future, the present becomes heavy. But when you begin to see a clear image of the person you want to become, every small action today starts to have meaning. Vision does not have to be grand. It just needs to be real. It might be the image of you becoming a better father, a mother who has time for her children, a person who no longer worries about every bill each month, or simply a version of yourself that you can respect when you look in the mirror. And I realize this very clearly in my own life. When vision appears, energy appears with it. You do not need anyone to push you to wake up early. You do not need anyone to remind you to try harder. Because inside you, there is a pull stronger than any external motivation. If today you feel tired, ask yourself honestly, not, did I get enough sleep, but rather, where am I going? Because nothing exhausts a person faster than continuing to move without knowing whether they are getting closer to or farther away from what they truly want. And this is only the beginning, because when you start to see your future more clearly, you will understand why energy does not come from rest, but from meaning. Principle 2. Energy does not come from rest, it comes from meaning. There is a very common belief that many people carry throughout their lives. They believe that if they are tired, all they need is more rest. Sleep a little longer. Take a few more days off. Escape from work for a while. But I want you to think a little deeper. If rest were the only answer, Why is it that some people return from a long vacation feeling more exhausted than before? The truth is this: rest can restore the body, but only meaning can restore the spirit. Your body is like a machine. It needs fuel and time to recover, but your spirit is different. Your spirit truly comes alive only when it knows that what you are doing is worth doing. I have observed this in many people. When they have no clear reason for their lives, every day feels heavy. They drag themselves through work, through responsibilities, through each morning waking up with the feeling, another day again. But when a person finds meaning, no matter how demanding the work is, you will see something very strange happen. They complain about being tired less often, not because they do less work, but because they work with a different spirit. I once said, human beings can endure almost any what if they clearly know the why. Meaning is the answer to that why. A mother can stay up all night for her child without complaining of exhaustion. An entrepreneur can work 14 hours a day and still keep the fire alive. Not because they have superpowers, but because in their minds, what they are doing has meaning. On the other hand, look at someone doing a job they do not believe in. They do not see a future. They do not feel value, no matter how light that work may be. Just a few hours are enough to completely drain them. And I realized something very important in my life. The greatest exhaustion is not being tired from working it, is being tired from living without meaning. When your life is not connected to a clear purpose, your spirit begins to leak energy little by little. You do not collapse all at once. You simply gradually lose enthusiasm, focus, and eventually belief in yourself. I have made this mistake myself. There were periods when I did many things but did not feel like I was moving forward. And I learned that it is not the workload that exhausts you. It is not seeing where it is taking you. When you connect your daily actions to a greater meaning, everything changes. You do not need to force yourself to be motivated. Motivation appears naturally as a consequence. So if today you feel drained of energy, ask yourself one very direct question. Does what I do every day truly matter to me? If the answer is vague, that is exactly the source of your exhaustion. And that is why vision is so important. Because vision turns today's small actions into meaningful steps toward the future. But there's another problem that many people run into next. Even when they begin to understand the importance of meaning, discipline still hurts them. Principle 3, discipline becomes torture when you don't know what you are doing it for. Many people tell me that they are not disciplined enough. They blame themselves for being weak, lacking willpower, lacking strength of character. But I want you to understand one thing clearly. The problem is rarely the person. The problem is the purpose. Discipline by itself is not the enemy. It only becomes the enemy when you do not know what you are enduring it for. Imagine having to carry a heavy object every day. If you do not know where you are carrying it, you will soon want to drop it. But if you know that at the end of the road is a better life for your family, that weight suddenly feels lighter. Life operates in the same way. When you force yourself to wake up early, eat properly, and learn every day, but you cannot see the future that all of this is building, discipline becomes punishment. You begin to fight against yourself. Every good habit feels like a loss. I have seen this repeat itself in countless people. They start out full of enthusiasm. They set schedules. They write plans. They swear that this time will be different. But just a few weeks later, they quit. Not because the plan was wrong, but because they did not have a strong enough why to endure the initial discomfort. I once said, discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. But if you cannot see the goal, where does that bridge lead? When the goal is vague, every disciplined action feels like a meaningless sacrifice. You sacrifice comfort. You sacrifice time. You sacrifice short-term pleasure, but you do not know what you are trading them for. And I realize this very clearly in my own life. There were times when I tried to apply every right habit, but deep inside, I did not truly believe in the path I was on. As a result, discipline became a burden. Only when I began to clearly see the person I wanted to become, did discipline change its nature. At that point, discipline was no longer forced. It became a quiet promise to my own future. You no longer ask, why do I have to do this? Instead, you ask, how can I do this better? That is a very important transformation. If today you feel that discipline is draining you, stop and ask yourself, what am I being disciplined for? If you cannot answer that question clearly, then no amount of willpower will be enough to save you from quitting. Discipline is not fueled by pressure. It is fueled by belief in a future worth the trade. And this is when you need to understand something even more important. When you have a vision that is clear enough, you do not just have motivation, you have a continuously renewable source of energy. And that is exactly why vision is the most powerful energy source a human being can possess. If by this point you realize that your problem is not a lack of discipline, but a lack of a clear enough vision, press subscribe and walk alongside Jim Rohn Treasures. This is where we do not just talk about short-term motivation, but together build life principles that give you energy, belief, and long-term direction for your life. Principle 4. Vision is the most powerful, renewable source of energy. There's something very interesting that I have observed over many years of working with people. Two people can do the same job, face the same pressure, yet the energy they carry each day can be completely different. One person steps into a new day feeling weighed down. The other steps into a new day with a very different vitality, not because of circumstances, but because of how they see their future. Vision doesn't just give you direction. It energizes you before you even begin to take action. When you know exactly where you're going, every step has a pull from up ahead. You don't have to drag yourself through each task. Something inside you is pulling you forward. I once said, people are not driven by circumstances, they are driven by the image in their mind. Think about the times in your life when you felt the most energized. Chances are, it wasn't when you rested the most. It was when you had something to look forward to. A plan, a goal, a clear image of the person you were becoming. When vision appears, energy begins to renew itself. Even after exhausting days, you still have a reason to keep going. Not because you aren't tired, but because you don't want to give up what you're building. I remember a time in my life when work piled up and responsibilities were heavy. From the outside, it wasn't an easy season, but I didn't feel depleted the way many people expected. The reason was very simple. I knew exactly what I was building. Every book I read, every lesson I prepared, every day I held myself to discipline. All of it was connected to a bigger image of the life I wanted to live. And I realized this. Vision is like an invisible energy source. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Unlike physical strength, which declines the more you spend it. Mental energy is nourished by clarity. Each time you see your future more clearly, you gain more strength. That's why people with strong vision often handle pressure better. They don't have less pressure than others. They simply have a stronger reason to endure it. If you find yourself getting discouraged easily, tired easily, quitting easily, don't rush to blame yourself. Ask yourself, is my picture of the future clear enough? Because when the future is blurry, the present becomes heavy. But when the future is clear, the present begins to have meaning. And I learned a very important lesson. You don't need to see the entire road. You just need an image clear enough to take the next step today. Just a reason strong enough to wake up. Just a goal compelling enough that you don't want to give up on yourself. From there, discipline is no longer a battle. It becomes a natural part of the person you are building. And when vision starts fueling you every day, you will realize the next very important thing. With just one strong enough reason, you can change the entire rhythm of your life. Principle 5. One powerful reason can change your entire rhythm of life. Some changes in life don't come from doing more. They come from finding the right one reason. Many people search for energy by changing their schedule. They change their bedtime, change their environment, change their job, but deep down their rhythm of life still doesn't change. Because your real rhythm isn't decided by the clock. It's decided by the reason you wake up each morning. I remember very clearly a conversation that left me with a lot to think about. A young man came to me and said he always felt exhausted, not just for a day or a week, but for many years. He said, "Sir, I sleep enough, I eat properly, but every morning when I wake up, I still feel empty." I looked at him and asked a very simple question. "So what makes you get up tomorrow morning?" He was silent, not for a few seconds, but for a long stretch of silence. And in that silence, I saw the root of the problem. He didn't lack strength. He lacked a reason. I told him, once you find a reason strong enough, your life will begin to change. Not 10 reasons, not a long list. Just one reason that truly touches your heart. A few months later, he came back to see me. His eyes were completely different. Not because every problem had disappeared, but because he had something to move toward. He said, "I wrote down my reason. I want to become someone my family can rely on. And every morning when I think about that, I no longer have to force myself to get up. I learned a lot from stories like that. A powerful reason doesn't make life easier, but it makes you stronger. When you have a clear reason, the things that used to make you hesitate start to feel natural. You don't need anyone pushing you. You don't need anyone reminding you, because inside you, there is something bigger than short-term comfort. I once said, motivation is something you can lose, but a reason to live is what will keep you standing. If today you feel like your life is scattered and lacking rhythm, stop and do one very simple thing. Write down the reason that makes you jump out of bed tomorrow morning. Not the reason society expects, not the reason to please other people, but the reason that doesn't allow you to live an average life. Just one sentence, one image, one promise to yourself, and you will realize that your rhythm of life begins to change. Not instantly, but in a very certain way. When you have a reason, energy finds you. When you have a reason, discipline is no longer a burden. And when you have a reason, you begin to live with a new rhythm, the rhythm of someone who knows where they are going. But there is still one more important step. It's not just having a reason. It's turning that reason into clarity every day. Principle 6. When the future is clear, discipline becomes lighter. There is something that many people have never been taught. Discipline should not be painful forever. If as each day passes, you feel like you have to struggle to stay disciplined, that is not a sign you are on the right path. It's a sign your future still isn't clear enough. When people can clearly see what they are building, their behavior begins to change naturally. No commands needed. No forcing required. Discipline at that point is more like a reflex than a battle. Think about someone who truly believes they are creating a better life for their family. You won't need to convince them to save money. You won't need to remind them to keep learning. They do those things because they match the person they are becoming. I once said, success doesn't come from doing extraordinary things. It comes from doing ordinary things in an extraordinary way for a long time. But to do that, you need a future clear enough to keep you committed to the small things each day. When the future is blurry, discipline is like swimming against the current. You move forward a little, then get tired, then let go. But when the future is clear, it's like you're flowing with the current in the right direction. You still have to swim. But each stroke has lift. I observed this in my own life. When I wasn't truly clear about what I wanted to build, every good habit required a lot of willpower. But when the image of the future became sharper, the behaviors that used to be difficult started to feel logical. I no longer asked, should I do this today? I asked, how can I do this better? That is a huge difference. Gentle discipline doesn't mean being lax. It means you are no longer fighting yourself. You don't have to use willpower to force yourself to live the right way. You live the right way because if you don't, you will betray the very future image you have believed in. And I realized something very profound. Sustainable discipline always begins with clarity, not pressure. If today you are trying to change your habits but keep failing, stop and ask yourself, is my picture of the future specific enough? Not, I want to be successful, but how do I want to live? Who do I want to become? What will I no longer accept in my life? When those questions have answers, you will see something very interesting happen. You don't need to try to be disciplined as much as before. You simply need to live in alignment with what you have clearly seen. And that is why people with strong vision often hold themselves to higher standards. Not because they are better, but because they cannot accept living below the image of their own future. But there is still one more important step. It's not just seeing the future. It's keeping that image alive every day. Principle 7. A vivid future image makes you raise your standards every day. There is something very important I want you to understand clearly. People don't live by the promises they say out loud. They live by the image they carry in their mind. You can say you want to change. You can promise that this time will be different. But if your image of the future is still blurry, your life will soon return to the same old standard. Standards are not determined by what you know. They are determined by what you accept. And what has amazed me over many years of observing people is this. When someone truly sees who they are becoming in the future, they start behaving differently even before anyone asks them to change. Not because they force themselves, but because they no longer feel aligned with their old self. Imagine you can see very clearly a future version of yourself, a calmer person, more responsible, living with discipline, and most importantly, respecting yourself. In that moment, some old behaviors start to feel uncomfortable, not because someone forbids you, but because you no longer see them as fitting that image. I once said, success is something you attract by the person you become. When the future image is vivid enough, you don't need anyone to remind you to keep your promises. You feel ashamed to live below your own standards. I remember very clearly the moment in my life when this happened. It wasn't a loud decision, just a very quiet awakening. I began to see clearly the person I wanted to become in 5, 10, 20 years. And from that moment, there were things I could no longer do, even though no one was stopping me. Not because I became more perfect, but because my standards had changed. A future image is like an invisible compass. It doesn't need to speak. It simply, quietly pulls you in the right direction. You don't need to set hundreds of goals. You just need an image that is clear enough, real enough, strong enough to make you respect yourself more every time you make a choice. And I realize this. You don't need motivation every day. You need an image strong enough that it won't allow you to live low. If today you're struggling to stay disciplined, don't ask, how can I try harder? Ask, is the image of who I want to become vivid enough? Because when that image is clear, you will automatically raise your standards in how you work, how you speak, how you use your time, and even how you treat yourself. And this is very important. When your standards are raised from the inside, you no longer have to battle with discipline. Discipline becomes a natural expression of the person you are building. But there is still one more truth I need to tell you directly. Many people fail, not because they lack ability, but because their goal isn't compelling enough to keep them there on the hard days. Principle 8. The reason you keep quitting is that your goal isn't compelling enough. Many people live with a quiet but harmful belief. They believe that if they quit, it's because they lack willpower, lack discipline, lack backbone. But I want you to listen very carefully to this. People rarely quit because they are weak. They quit because what they're chasing isn't big enough to keep them in it. Willpower is a limited resource. You can use it to start, but you cannot rely on it for the long road. If everything in life has to be sustained by willpower, then sooner or later, you will burn out. I once said, motivation is unreliable, but the right goal isn't. Look closely. The people who maintain discipline long-term are not the ones with the strongest willpower. They are the ones with a reason big enough that they won't allow themselves to stop. When your goal is too small, every difficulty becomes a perfectly valid reason to quit. A tiring day, one failure, one criticism, that's enough for you to give yourself permission to stop. But when the goal is big enough, you no longer ask, should I keep going? You ask, how do I get through this? I have seen this repeated many times. One person says they want to make a little more money. Another person says they want to build a life where they no longer have to live in constant worry. Those two statements may sound similar, but the energy behind them is completely different. A vague goal creates vague action. A small goal creates short-term persistence. Only a compelling enough goal creates endurance. And I realized something very important. A goal shouldn't just be enough to get you started. It must be big enough to keep you there on the days you most want to quit. If today you keep starting and stopping, don't rush to blame yourself. Ask yourself, is what I'm pursuing enough to make me respect myself more? Not, I want to succeed. But if I achieve this, how will I change as a person? How will my life be different? What will I no longer have to endure? When a goal is tied to identity, you don't quit so easily. I once made the mistake of setting goals that were too safe. They didn't require me to grow up, and because of that, I didn't stay in it long enough to see results. Only when I started setting goals that didn't allow me to keep living the old way, everything began to change. A compelling goal is not an easy goal. It's a goal that makes you feel ashamed to give up on yourself. And when you have a goal like that, discipline is no longer a burden. It becomes a reasonable price for a life worth living. But there's still one final principle, a principle that ties all of this together. Discipline in the end is not what you do today. It is the promise you keep with the person you want to become. Principle 9. Discipline is a promise to the person you want to become. When people talk about discipline, many think about the things they have to do. Wake up early, work hard, refuse comfort. But if discipline is only seen as a list of obligations, it will soon become a burden. I want you to see discipline in a different way. Discipline is not punishment for the present. It is a promise to the future. Every time you stay disciplined, you're not just finishing a task. You are telling yourself, I am someone who keeps my word. And that is very important. Because people are not built by explosive moments. They are built by small promises kept consistently every day. I once said, success is a few simple disciplines practiced every day. And failure is too. Discipline is where those two paths split. When you clearly see the person you want to become, every disciplined action takes on a new meaning. You no longer ask, do I feel like doing this today? You ask, would the person I'm becoming do this? And if the answer is yes, you act no matter how you feel. Discipline at that point no longer depends on motivation. It depends on identity. You don't brush your teeth every day because you feel motivated. You do it because that's who you are. Sustainable discipline works the same way. I learned that how you live each day is how you cast a vote for the person you will become. Each small choice is a vote for clarity or for procrastination, a vote for the future or for short-term comfort. And when you understand this, you will stop asking the wrong questions. You no longer ask, how do I get more motivation? You ask, who am I keeping my word to? Discipline doesn't require you to be perfect. It only requires you to be honest with yourself. There will be days when you're tired. There will be days when you doubt. But if you have clearly seen the person you want to become, you won't betray that image for long. Because deep down, you know that every time you break discipline, you're not just delaying results, you're weakening your own belief. And belief, once eroded, will drain your energy faster than any hard labor ever could. That's why I always emphasize, keep your word to yourself even when no one is watching, because it is. In the moments no one witnesses, that the person you are becoming is shaped most clearly. Today, we went together on a very simple journey, but not an easy one. You learned that energy doesn't come from rest. It comes from meaning. Discipline cannot survive without vision. And small goals won't keep you there on hard days. In the end, everything comes back to one core point. Who you become matters more than anything you achieve. If you can clearly see that person, you will find energy. You will keep discipline. And you will not easily give up on yourself. I want to ask you one question before this video ends. Is your image of the future clear enough for you to keep your word to yourself? If the answer is still unclear, don't blame yourself. Start with one very small thing. Write down the reason you want to live better, not for the world, but for yourself. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to continue the journey with Jim Rohn Treasures, where we build vision, discipline, and belief together for a life worth living. And leave a comment below which principle in today's video made you think the most. I truly want to read your answer. I'll close with a quote I've always treasured. You and I both have a gift that is today. Use it wisely. I truly appreciate that you stayed until the end of this video. See you again in the next journey.